Okay, so hi everyone. Hope I'm audible and visible clearly. So now, welcome you all to the tutorial we are going to do for accounting for leases, SLFRS 16. So since we were unable to do the tutorial physically, so we will be recording this tutorial for you, and then you can get the knowledge or refer to the questions we do. Okay, so accounting for leases, SLFRS 16. That lesson you have discussed in the lectures physically. So now we will be covering a few questions to clear the things you learned during the lecture. Okay, so already we have uploaded the tutorial questions in the LMS. If you can go to your course manual in the bottom part, you can see these questions. So apparently there are 7 questions. Altogether we have given 7 questions, but due to time constraints and everything, we will be covering in order to cover the full lessons, full theories you covered during the lecture. I have selected 3 questions to the today's tutorial. So we will be discussing question number 2, question number 4, and then question number 7. Okay, so first we'll go to question number 2 and then continue. Okay, yes. Now, first of all, we'll read this question. Now, what is this? A lessee enters into a leasing agreement on 1st April 2021 for equipment. Okay, so they are trying to lease an equipment. So lessee is entering into the leasing agreement on 1st April 2021. What does that mean? If you can remember, you have learned commencement date. Commencement date in the sense, if you can go back to your slides, this one. The date on which a lessor makes an underlying asset available for use by a lessee. ලෙසෝ විසින් ලෙසීට යම්කිසි underlying asset එකක් පාවිච්චි කිරීම සඳහා use කරන්න available තත්ත්වයට පත් කරන දවස. So date on which lessor makes an underlying asset available for use by the lessee. ලෙසීගේ පාවිච්චිය සඳහා available කරන දවස. Okay, so if in the question, if that commencement date is not separately given, usually, you take that date as the date entering into the leasing agreement. So in this question, we have the leasing and entering date to the leasing agreement, that is 1st April 2021. The lease requires an initial payment of 50,000. Lessee has to pay 50,000 initially. Annual rental of 40,000 payable at the end of each year starting from 31st March 2022. So the date, the commencement date is 1st April 2021. And then after 1 year, starting after 1 year, 31st March 2022, starting from this date, you have to pay, the lessee has to pay annual rentals, 40,000. The primary period of the lease is for 4 years. Now the lease period is for 4 years. So how many lease rentals? How many installments? If they are annual installments, as it's mentioned, annual rentals, there will be 4 installments because the period covered by the lease agreement, lease period is 4 years. So after the end of the primary period, the lessee has the right to extend lessee has the right to extend the lease indefinitely on payment of a nominal annual rental. Lessee has the right to extend the lease by paying a nominal lease rental. The interest rate implicit in the lease is 15%. The rate given in the agreement is 15%. The present value annuity factor at that rate means 15%. For the 4th year is 2.855. Now here you can take annuity factor. Now you might be wondering why we are using annuity factor here. I'll teach you why are we going to use this annuity factor. If you are not given the annuity factor in the question, there's another way of getting the present value. In order to get the present value of the future cash flows, you can use the annuity factor or normal discounting method. So I'll be teaching you both methods. We will be discussing both methods. Then it will be clear for you. The lessee believes that the equipment can be used for 4 years and will have no scrap value at the end of the period. Okay, so the useful life of the equipment is 4 years because lessee believes that equipment can be used for 4 years. The lessee depreciates assets of this type using the straight line basis. Okay, both the lessee and the lessor have accounting periods ending on 31st March each year. Okay, the accounting periods are also the same. So what is required? Most important thing. Record these transactions in the lessees and lessors books. Both lessees and lessors we have to consider. That's why I selected this question, because we can cover both parties, lessees and lessors books of accounts for the year ended 31st March 2022. This date is very important. Why? We need to check what is the date these records have to be kept. Now this lease agreement entering date, in other words, commencement date of this lease is 1st April 2021. They are asking us to record these transactions after 1 year. So the first year we have to cover the first year. We have to cover the first year in the sense you need to record the initial liability, initial right of use asset values, and then there are few adjustments, right? Examples like depreciation, lease interest. Likewise, you need to do the adjustments required for the first year. And then extract of the financial statements of lessee and lessor for the year ended 31st March 2022. So you need to show the extracts of the financial statements for both parties. Okay, now I think the question is clear for you. ප්‍රශ්නේ දැන් පැහැදිලි ඇති. Now we'll go to the answers. How to do the answers. Now, in this session, I'll be taking an Excel sheet because that will be easy for me to show you the sums, because Excel is very useful when you are doing sums, even for you, not in the exam, even for you when you do your daily calculation parts, especially when you are working. Make sure you have the competency to use Excel, because that is very important, more especially when it comes to accounting side, accounting department and everything. Okay, so question 2, I have taken the details here. From the question, I have taken the details because that would be easy for me to do the calculation. So the lease agreement date, that means the commencement date, initial payment 50,000, this one, payment 50,000, annual rental 40,000, lease period is 4 years, interest rate 15, present value annuity factor at 15%. For the 4th year is 2.855, and then the useful life is 4 years. Okay, now I'll discuss lessee's books first. Now first of all, මෙතන මේ ගානේ lessee කවුද lessor කවුද කියලා නම් වශයෙන් separately දීලා නැහැ. We can't find lessee and lessor separately. So you have to pick the details required for the computation. අපි දැන් ඉස්සෙල්ලාම හදන්න යන්නේ lessee. First of all, we will be discussing how to keep records in lessee's books and what are the extracts of the financial statements after 1 year. After 1 year කියන්නේ ඇයි? Lease agreement එකට enter වෙන්නේ 1st April, and then we are preparing 31st March 2022 අවුරුද්දකට පස්සේ. Okay, now lessee's books. Now the first step when it comes to lessee's books, the first thing you need to do, what is that? First of all, you need to compute lease liability. Now if you can remember, when it comes to lessee ගේ පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම අපි leases identify කරනකොට, when you recognize leases, when you identify leases, there are two things you need to remember. There are two things you need to recognize. What are those? Lease liability and the right of use asset. Lease liability and right of use asset. මේ දෙකම ඔයගොල්ලෝ කම්පියුට් කරගන්න ඕනේ ලෙසීගේ බුක්ස් වලට එනකොට. අපි වෙනමම asset එකක් identify කරනවා right of use asset කියලා. යම්කිසි asset එකක් පාවිච්චි කිරීමේ අයිතිය, භාවිතා කිරීමේ අයිතිය. We are recognizing the right of use asset separately. And then on the other hand, we are taking that use no right of use of that asset no. ඒක නිසා we have a liability. අපි දැන් මොකක් හරි lease company එකකින් vehicle එකක් ගන්නවා. හිතන්නකෝ මම තමයි ගන්න කියලා. So who is the lessee? I'm the lessee. I'm the person who is obtaining the lease. Who is the lessor? That leasing company. ඒගොල්ලෝ තමයි අපිට lease එක දීලා තියෙන්නේ. So I'm the lessee, leasing company is the lessor. If I'm recording the transaction in my books, that means lessee's books, I have to recognize two things. What are those? Lease liability and the right of use asset. මට අර මොකක් හරි motor vehicle එකක් ගන්න එකේ භාවිත කිරීමේ අයිතිය ලැබෙනවා. I'm getting that right of use asset. On the other hand, I need to pay for the lease company. I need to pay some amount of money to the leasing company. So I have a lease liability as well. So I need to recognize both. Remember that. Okay, so first of all, you need to compute lease liability. Now, if I can go to your slides, yes, and show you what are the things you need to consider when it comes to the lease liability. I'm pretty sure you have discussed these things. So if you can remember, go to this slide number 14. It is clearly mentioned. Lease payments include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 5 things. Fixed payments කියන්නේ fixed යම් කිසි ගාණක් අපි ගෙවනවා. Lease period එකේදී. එහෙමත් නැත්නම් variable lease payments. එකම ගාණක් නෙමෙයි variable amount එකක් ගෙවනවා වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Payments වල. I'm the lessee, I'm paying now. It can be a fixed amount or it can be a variable amount. Or it can be residual value guarantees. On the other hand, you can call this guaranteed residual value. Lessee guarant වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපි lessee හරි third party to the lessor. අපි simple විදිහට ගත්තොත් lessee මෙතන මේ question එකේ හැටියට මම guarant වෙලා තියෙනවා යම් කිසි ගාණක් ගෙවන්නම් කියලා residual value එකකින් lessor ට. එතකොට ඒක. And then exercise price of a purchase option, penalties for terminating the lease. මේ options දෙකත් එන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට වැඩිපුරම ගොඩක් එන්නේ fixed payments, variable lease payments, guaranteed residual values. So if you have to consider all these 5 elements when it comes to lease payments. Hari, lease payments ටික ගන්නවා. And now you can't take these lease payments, the total of lease payments directly as it is. Why? You need to compute the present value. You need to take the present value of the lease payments, not the rough amount of lease payments, the present value. So you need to compute the present value of lease payments. This is how you simply take the lease liability. So in our question, what are the things? Do we have fixed payments? Yes. Why? We have annual rentals. 40,000 worth of annual rentals for 4 years. So that is fixed. 40,000 is fixed. So that is the fixed payment. And then do we have variable lease payments? No, it's not mentioned. Do we have residual value guarantees? It's not mentioned. Other two also not mentioned in the question. So we have only fixed payments. Now what should I do? I have to take the present value of the fixed payments. So how to take this? Now there are 2 ways. I told you in the question, there are 2 ways to get these things. In this question, if you can read this, present value annuity factor at 15%. That is the rate we are using, implicit interest rate. For the 4th year is 2.855. මේකත් දීලා තියෙනවා. අපිට annuity factor එකක් දීලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් annuity factor එක නැත්තම් අපි කොහොමද කරන්නේ? ඒකත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕනේ. කොහොමද අපි annuity factor එක දීලා නැත්තම් present value එක හොයාගන්නේ? ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැනටමත් මේක කරලා තියෙනවා. It's simple. How to take these things? There are how many years? 4 years. I'm taking 4 years. I have only fixed payments, right? In this question, we have only fixed payments. How much is that fixed payment? I'm directly taking, I'm linking this 40,000, 40,000, 40,000 and again 40,000. There are 40,000s. Now this is everything. Other than this fixed payment, we don't have any other payment. Now I'm taking the present value. How to take the present value? You need to take the discount factor. You have already done these questions, right? Discount factor. Discount factor එක ගන්න කොහොමද? What is the formula? In your calculator, you can do 1 divided by 1 plus, what is the rate? 15%. I'm taking it directly, 15% into, you are taking the discount factor for first year, 1. This is the interest rate. This is the discount factor. So for year 2, for year 3 and year 4, you can compute. How to take the year 2 one? Now I'm getting the formula copied. That's why it is the answer is getting there. So if you can take 1 divided by 1 plus the rate 15% into 2. This one into 3. Using your calculator, you can easily get these figures. 4. Okay, this is how you get the discount factors. Okay. Now, after getting the discount factor, you can take the present value. You can take the present value. Present value of lease payments. How to take that? You multiply 40,000 from the discount factor. Okay. Likewise, you can get the figures. මම Excel use කරන නිසා මම ඒක fast ගන්නවා. ඔයගලන්ට පුළුවන් multiply කරලා ගන්න. Multiply කරගෙන අරගෙන අපි මේ හැම එකේම මේ payments 4 present value කරපු payments 4 total එක ගන්නවා. It's 114,199. Let me check the answer. Yes. 114,199. So this figure you can get using this discount factors. Using discount factors. Okay. එතකොට අපිට annuity factor එකක් දීලා නැත්නම් discount කරලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ normal ගන්න විදිහට ගන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට 1,14,199 114,199. That is the present value of the lease liability. Lease payments. So that means lease liability. If you are having the annuity factor. Now in this question, you have the annuity factor given. How to do that? Very easy. You have the annuity factor 2.855. Yes, 855. And you have the annual rental. මේ 40,000 කියන එකනේ අවුරුදු 4ක් දක්වාම continue වෙන්නේ fixed payment එකක් විදියට හැම අවුරුද්දෙම එක ගන්න. එතකොට කොහොමද present value එක ගන්නෙ annuity factor එක use කරලා? Very easy. You multiply the annuity factor by that value. You are getting this figure 114,200. Now, is there a significant difference between these two values? No, right? මෙහෙම annuity factor එකෙන් ගත්තත් එකයි, discount factors අරගෙන compute කරත් එකයි. So if you in the question, if you have the annuity factor, so you can easily multiply the annuity factor by the fixed payment, that rate, that value 40,000. එකම දේ තමයි මේ value එක 40,000 කියන එක same වෙන්න ඕනේ. අවුරුදු 4 දක්වාම same වෙන්න ඕනේ. If the same value is getting continued for the whole period, then only you can use the annuity factor. Remember that. Okay, so I will be taking this 114,200 because in the question annuity factor is given. Okay, now this is the lease liability. Lease liability we computed. Hope you are clear. I'll be taking this figure. Okay. Perfect. Now we will be discussing the second important thing. Second important thing you need to compute. Now I told you need to compute two things, lease liability and the right of use asset. Now you have to compute, you need to get the value of the right of use asset. Now, if you can go to your slide, what is included in the right of use asset? Basically, you need to take the cost. There are four components. What are those four components? Initial direct cost. Example, legal charges. Lessee has paid some legal charges that will be initial direct cost. And then initial measurement of the lease liability. This value you already know because in this part, lease liability ke lahadiya mukadda. Initial measurement of the lease liability. That value you already have. And then part C, lease payments made at or before the commencement date. On the other hand, you can call this down payment. මොනවා හරි down payment එකක් කරලා තියෙනවා නම් අපි කියනවා initial lease payment එකක්. එතකොට ඒකත් ගන්න ඕනේ මේ right of use asset කරනකොට. Fourth part, an estimate of cost to be incurred by the lessee in dismantling and removing the underlying asset. එතකොට අපි කිව්වොත් අපි දැන් PP කතා කරනකොට when we were discussing PP, we already know we have to take the dismantling cost. Then අපි asset එක particular asset එක at the end of the useful lifetime, if you are dismantling and restoring the site, you have to take the present value of that future payment as a part of the cost. Similarly, if you have to dismantle this leased asset, then what to do? You have to take the present value of those payments to the right of use asset value. So, PP වගේම තමයි. A treatment එකම තමයි මෙතන කරන්න තියෙන්නේ. Remember that. Okay, now we'll be taking the right of use asset value for this question. Now, what is included? Do we have initial direct cost? In this question, initial direct cost legal charges වගේ lessee ගෙවපුවා. Remember, lessee paid by lessee. හරි? Lessee ගෙවපුවා තියෙනවද? නෑ. Initial direct cost මේ question එකේ නෑ. And then do we have initial measurement of the lease liability? Of course, we computed. So we'll write lease liability. So the part 1 එකේ compute කරපු ගාන directly you can take 114,200 initial measurement of the lease liability. Do you have down payment? So initial payment, yes, this one. You have paid 50,000 initially as the down payment. So you can take it clearly. Initial payment. Or you can call it down payment. That is 50,000. Do we have dismantling and restoring cost? No, not given in the question. Okay, so apparently these are the two components coming under right of use asset. What is the value? 164,200. Yes, 164,200. Now we have computed two important things. I told you we have to get the lease liability and then we are getting the right of use asset. Okay. Now we'll see how to record these two values, these two lease liability and the right of use asset using ledger accounts. Now we need to know how to record these transactions as well. This is how you do it. First of all, take this lease liability value, 114,200. What is the double entry for this? Double entry is you need to take now. ඔගොල්ලන්ගේ ගාන කියන්න ලේසි වෙන්න මම ලීසා අපේ ledger accounts already ඇඳලා තියෙන්නේ. Now when you do the question, you can have these three accounts and get the transactions recorded. Now what are the ledger accounts I need? For now I need right of use asset ledger account and the lease liability. So in the lease liability, I'm putting this value. Lease liability credited by 114,200. What should I write? I can write it as right of use asset. Right of use asset. What should be the date? Date should be the commencement date. This value, this date. 1st April 2021. මෙදාට තමයි lease එක start වෙන්නේ. Commencement date. So the same thing. I should debit the right of use asset. I'm debiting right of use asset by 114,200. Same date. And then it is lease liability. Okay, this one is done. Now what about this one? Initial payment 50,000. Karapu down payment එක 50,000. Now think about this from lessee's books. Lessee කියන්නේ මම මේ equipment එක ගන්නකොට down payment එකක් කරලා තියෙනවා. Who paid? Lessee paid. So what happened to cash? Lessee ගේ පැත්තෙන් cash වලට මොකද වෙන්නේ? දැන් already ගෙවලා තියෙන්නේ. Cash credit. Cash credit. I'm not using a cash book here. Cash credit, where the debit entry goes. It goes to right of use asset because it is a part of the asset. Right of use asset කියන asset එකේ part එකක්. Down payment එක. Here also we took that value, no? 50,000. So here cash credit, right of use asset, debit by 50,000. What is the date? Same date, commencement date, because the down payment is paid on the commencement date. We can assume that 1st April 2021. Okay, so we have recognized lease liability and we have recognized right of use asset. That is done. Initially, we have covered. Now, we are talking about the first year. No? We are recording transactions for the first year after 1 year. Now, initial recognition is done. Now, the things to do during first year is you need to recognize the lease interest. And then you need to recognize the depreciation of the right of use asset. These are the two things you need to do. Now you need to recognize lease interest. අපි දැන් lease liability එකක් තියෙනවා. මේ liability එක වෙනුවෙන් අපි interest එකක් ගෙවන්න ඕනනේ. අපි bank loan එකක් ගත්තා වගේ තමයි. When you obtain a bank loan, you need to pay bank loan interest. When you obtain a lease, you need to pay lease interest. So how to compute the lease interest? It is very easy to compute the lease interest using this T accounts. So you make sure you have this T account when you do those questions, then it would be easy for you to get the lease interest. How to get this? Okay, now initial lease liability, as we computed, our lease liability is 114,200. මෙච්චර ගාණක් ණයයි. Lease liability එක. How to take the lease interest? Lease interest. කවද්ද මේක අපි compute කරන්නේ? After 1 year, 31st March 2022. After 1 year, we are computing lease interest. Lease interest එක කොහොමද ගන්නෙ? අපිට තියෙන lease liability එක. Our lease liability is 114,200. You multiply it by interest rate implicit in the lease. So, 15% is given in the question. You are multiplying your lease liability, opening lease liability by 15%. What is the value? 17,130. So this is the lease interest. This is the figure we need to use as the lease interest. What should be the double entry? Lease interest is an expense. So I'm using a lease interest account separately. Date should be the same, 31st March 2022. Where did I credit this? Lease liability. Lease liability එක වැඩි වෙනවා. මේ ගෙවන්න තියෙන interest එක නිසා lease liability එක වැඩි වෙනවා. That's why you are crediting the lease liability account. Here you have credited and then you are recognizing the lease interest. 17,130. So lease interest you recognized and then you have credited the lease liability account. Why? You need to pay this. You need to pay 17,130. Now the next one you need to recognize is annual lease rental. Then may අවුරුද්දේ lease interest එක identify කරා තමයි. ඒ වගේම තමයි you have to pay the lease rental no. So this year, when you pay the lease rental, what happens? What happens to your cash? Cash, again, credit. How much is the lease rental? Annual rental is 40,000. So 40,000 cash credit, debit goes to where? Your lease liability is getting reduced by 40,000. Why? You paid 40,000 for the lessor. So your lease liability 40,000 getting debited. You write it as cash. What is the date? After 1 year, 31st March 2022. Same date. Okay. Now, how to get the closing balance of this lease liability? It's easy. 131,330. I'll be taking the same figure here. The difference is 91,330. You write it as balance carried down. Balance brought forward. 91,330. It's a liability. So it's the final liability we have as at the end of the period, as at 31st March 2022. We'll put the date as well. 31st March 2022. Okay. So this is the lease liability. Right of use asset. Do we have any changes? In the right of use asset ledger account, we don't have any changes. But you need to recognize one thing. Now, lease interest done. What is left? You need to get the depreciation. Now, how to do the depreciation? There's a way of doing the depreciation. If you can remember this slide number 20, when you depreciate right of use assets, when you depreciate leased assets, there are conditions you need to recognize. What are those conditions? Whether lessor transfers ownership of the underlying asset to the lessee by the end of the lease term. Lease term එක අවසානයේ lessor lesseeට ඒ asset එකේ ownership එක transfer කරනවද? Whether the lessor transfers the ownership of that underlying asset to the lessee at the end of the lease term. If yes, here yes, answer is yes. Depreciate the asset using the useful life. එතකොට කාගාවද මේ asset එක වැඩිපුරම කාලයක් තියෙන්නේ? Lease term එක 4 years. හැබැයි lease term එක ඉවර වෙලා මේ asset එක මට ලැබෙනවා. Equipment එකේ අපේ useful life එක ඒක 10 years වෙන්න පුළුවන්, 20 years වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට වැඩිම කාලයක්. දැන් අවුරුදු 4කුත් මං ගාව තිබ්බා. ඉතුරු අවුරුදු ටිකත් මං ගාව නේද asset එක තියෙන්නේ. If the lessor is transferring the ownership to the lessee, to me, then I am using the useful life of that asset to depreciate. Hope you are clear. Let's say lessor is not transferring the ownership of the asset. The answer is no. So lease term would be 4 years. After 4 years, I'm not getting the ownership of that asset. It will be again going to what? To the lessor. Then what is the date? What is the period you are using for the depreciation? Depreciate using earlier of the useful life of the right of use asset or the lease term. The shorter period you will be using. Lease term එක ගන්නවා, අපේ lease period එක, useful lifetime එක ගන්නවා, මේ දෙකෙන් අඩු value එක, අඩු period එක බලලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ depreciate කරනවා. Okay, now in this question what happens? Are we getting the ownership or not? Here, if you can read, after the end of the primary period, a lessee has the right to extend the lease indefinitely on payment of a nominal annual rental. එතකොට අපිට මෙතනදී අපිට assume කරන්න පුළුවන් අපිට ownership එක ලැබෙනවා කියලා. මොකද අපිට අයිතිය තියෙනවා lease term එක extend කරලා indefinitely extend කරන්න nominal annual rental එකක් ගෙවන්නම් කියලා. Nominal annual rental එකක් තමයි ගෙවන්නේ. So in this question we can assume that lessee is getting the ownership transferred at the end of the lease term. එහෙනම් මොකද අපි use කරන්නේ? මෙතන අපි එතකොට depreciate කරන්න use කරන්නේ useful life එක. හැබැයි දැන් මේ ගානේ හැටියට මොකද වෙන්නේ? lease term and the useful life is equal. එතකොට මොකද එහෙම වුණාම වෙන්නේ? If you can remember, I'm telling you one additional thing. When it comes to lessor, they are classifying lease as finance lease and operating lease. I'll discuss this later. Finance lease and operating lease. එතකොට අපි එහෙම classify කරන conditions මොනවද? Conditions are දීලා තියෙනවා 1 2 3 4 5 and then there are 3 indications. Indicators are there. මේ indicators and examples දිහා බැලුවහම සමහර ඒවා තියෙනවා ownership එක transfer වෙන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා explain කරන. So ඒ වගේ conditions ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ ගානක දීලා තිබුණොත් ඒවත් use කරන්න පුළුවන්. Now in this question it directly says this lessee has the right to extend the lease period for an indefinite time and then paying a nominal annual rental. So in that case you can assume the ownership is getting transferred. So here we can use 4 years. Question එකේ lease term එකයි useful life එකයි equal. මේක හැම වෙලේම එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙම නොවුනොත් you can directly take the useful life 4 years to depreciate this asset. So how to compute the depreciation? Here, මෙතනම compute කරමු. Depreciation. So asset value, right of use asset value is 164,200. You divide it by how many years? 4 years. 41,050. So 41,050. This is the depreciation. What is the double entry? Accumulated depreciation credit, depreciation expense debit. The date would be the same, 31st March 2022. At the end of the year, you are computing. So accumulated depreciation credit, 41,050. Okay, so we have recognized the lease interest, that expense, and then we have recognized the depreciation expense. So these are the things you need to recognize when it comes to lessee's books. Hope you're okay. We have to recognize the lease liability, and then we have to recognize the right of use asset, and then අවුරුදු ගාන වැඩි වෙන්න ඒ අවුරුද්දට අදාළව relevant to that period you need to recognize the lease interest and the depreciation. Okay, now we'll move on how to do these extracts of the financial statements. Now in the second part, it requests extracts of the financial statements of lessee for the year ended 31st March 2022. අවුරුද්ද අවසානයේද extracts ඕනේ කියලා. So the statement of profit or loss for the year ended 31st March and then statement of financial position you can prepare. What is coming under the profit or loss statement? First of all, you need to recognize depreciation expense. So that would be an administrative expense. Depreciation. How much is the depreciation? 41,050. 41,050. And then we have to recognize the lease interest. Finance cost. Coming under finance cost, lease interest, value is 17,130. These are the expenses you need to recognize. We don't have any income or any other things. Okay, coming into a statement of financial position. First of all, you need to recognize, now we have recognized depreciation, we have recognized lease interest. These are okay. Now we have to recognize the right of use asset. So you are keeping this right of use asset for more than 12 months. That means it is a non-current asset. Non-current asset. Coming on non-current assets, you need to recognize the right of use assets separately. That value is, how much is that? 164,200. If you add these two values, it would be the same. Yes, 164,200. Now, apart from this, you need to recognize the accumulated depreciation. Now, only 1 year gone. Only now 1 year is gone. So in that case, you have only 1 year depreciation as the accumulated depreciation. What is that value? 41,050. That is a minus figure. You need to deduct. So what should be the carrying value? It should be 123,150. So this is the non-current asset. Now, the important part, then you need to recognize. Now I have considered accumulated depreciation, lease interest, and the right of use asset. Done. Now we have to recognize this lease liability as well. Now there's an important thing. When you recognize lease liability, tell me what is the final lease liability? Now after 1 year, අවුරුද්දකට පස්සේ lease liability කීයක් තියෙන්නේ? That is 91,330. This is the total liability we have. But we need to recognize this as current liability and non-current liability. You need to classify this total liability as current and non-current. How to compute the current liability? Take it like this. First of all, take next installment value. Next year, you will be paying 40,000. Next year, you will be paying 40,000 as the installment. Take the installment, this 40,000. And then compute interest portion in the next installment. ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ 40,000 ගෙවනවා installment එක කියලා. ඒ ගෙවන 40,000 ඇතුලේ දැන් installment එකක් හැදෙන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා දන්නවනේ. lease liability එකයි interest portion එකයි දෙකම එකතු වෙලා තමයි installment එකක් හැදෙන්නේ. දැන් අපි මේ බලන්නේ next year ගෙවන්න යන installment එකේ that means 40,000. ඒකේ ඇතුලේ තියෙන interest portion එක. How to get that interest portion in the next installment? 40,000 is the installment. මේ year එක අන්තිමට වෙනකොට. ඒ කියන්නේ ලබන අවුරුද්දේ beginning එක වෙනකොට අපේ liability කීයද? We have 91,330. මෙච්චරක් අපි ණයයි as the lease liability. So how to take the interest? 91,330 into 15%. එහෙම compute කරලා තමයි interest එක ගෙවන්නේ. තව විදිහකට ඔක ගන්න පුළුවන්. කොහොමද? මේ T account එක තියෙනවා නම් ඔයගලන්ට එක ගන්න එක ලේසි. Using the T account, now you have taken the balance brought forward value, no? This year is gone. Now this is for the first year. පළවෙනි අවුරුද්දේ තමයි මේ ටික රෙකෝඩ් කරේ. ඔර දෙවෙනි අවුරුද්දේ කොහොමද රෙකෝඩ් කරන්නේ? balance එක තියෙනවා. ඒ balance එකට අපේ opening lease liability එකට again next year also you are computing the lease interest. How to compute the lease interest? 91,330 multiplied by 15%. What is the value? 13,700. This value. Next year also, you will be paying cash. You will be paying the installment. How much is that? 40,000. Likewise, it will go for 4 years. Lease period එක අවුරුදු 4යිනේ. අවුරුදු 4ක් දක්වා කොහොම continue වෙනවා. 0 වෙනකම්. ඔයාලට ඒක පස්සේ කරලා බලන්න පුළුවන්. හරි. ඒතර දැන් මම බැලුවේ next installment එක 40,000. ඒ 40,000 ඇතුලේ තියෙනවා interest portion එක 13,700. කොහොමද අපි ඒක ගත්තේ? අපේ opening lease liability එකට interest rate එක apply කරලා. After applying the interest rate for opening lease liability. Okay. If the next installment is 40,000, if 13,700 is included as the interest in the next installment, what is the lease liability? Actual lease liability in the next installment. අපි මේ 40000ක් ගෙවනකොට lease liability එකෙන් කොච්චරක් ගෙවනවද? 40,000 වලින් 13,700 අයින් කරාම interest එක කියලා ඉතුරු ටික තමයි අපි lease liability එකෙන් අඩු වෙන විදිහට ගෙවන්නේ. That is 26,301. Hope you are clear. Installment is 40,000. In that installment, we had the interest, that is 13,700. After removing that 13,700, you are getting the lease liability 26,301. So next year, you will be paying 26,301 from this 91,000. So what is the current liability? Current liability is 26,301. Then how to take the non-current liability? Okay, it is very easy. How much is the total liability? Total liability, you have to pay 91,330 after 1 year. Eking 26,301 all are already given over. එහෙනම් balance part එක කීයද? 91,330 minus 26,301. So the balance part, non-current liability, අවුරුද්දකට පස්සේ ගෙවන ගාන 65,030. This value 65,030. කොහොමද ගත්තේ? Total liability එකෙන් ගෙවන්න තියෙන total liability එකෙන් 26,301 අඩු කරාට පස්සේ එන ගාන 65,030. So this one we can directly take it here after non-current assets. You can write non-current liabilities, lease liability, non-current portion. Non-current portion is 65,330. And then we have the current liability. Current liability is again lease liability. Current portion is 26,301. Okay, so this is how you record transactions in lessee's books. This is how you do the transactions, record the transactions, and prepare the extracts of the financial statements in lessee's books. We are done with the lessee's books. Okay, so now we are done with lessee's books. Now we are moving to the next part, lessor's books. Now lessorge books වල කොහොමද lease එක දුන්න කෙනාගේ lessorge books වල කොහොමද මේක record කරන්නේ? හරි. මේකේ අපිට මුලින්ම කරන්න තියෙන්නේ okay lessor's books අපිට මුලින්ම කරන්න තියෙන අපි question එකට ගිහින් බලනකොට ඒ details ටික මම ගාව already තියෙනවා. I have the details here already which I use for lessee's books. එතකොට අපිට කරන්න තියෙන්නේ මුලින්ම net investment එක හදා ගන්නවා. We need to compute the net investment. This is the first step you need to do when it comes to lessor's books. Now, if I can go back to your slides and show you what is the equation we're going to use for net investment, this one. Net investment is equals to gross investment in the lease discounted at the interest rate implicit in the lease. Okay. Net investment එක කියන්නේ discount කරපු gross investment එක. Now, the next question is, what is gross investment? Gross investment in the lease equals lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. Then මෙතන lease payments you already know. What do you mean by lease payments? So coming under lessee, we discussed what are the things we include under lease payments. Same thing. Fixed payments, variable payments, guaranteed residual value, exercise price of a purchase option, penalties for terminating the lease. These are the lease payments. Okay. So this lease payment directly goes to gross investment. Hope you are clear now. Plus, what is the additional part? Additionally, you have unguaranteed residual value. Now, in the lease payment, you have guaranteed residual value included. Garan karana gana, promise vena gana include venama. Residual value එකෙන් මෙන්න මෙච්චර ගෙවන්නම් කියලා promise වෙන ගාන include වෙනවා lease payments ඇතුලේ. එහෙම promise වෙන්නේ නැහැ. හරියටම කියන්නේ නැහැ. Unguaranteed residual value එකක් තියෙනවා නම් that you have to take separately when it comes to net investment. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ lease payments and unguaranteed residual value මේ දෙක discount කරාට පස්සේ අපි කියනවා net investment කියලා. Okay. Now I'm moving to the question. When it comes to our question, do we have, now the new thing is unguaranteed residual value, no? Do we have unguaranteed residual value in this question? No. Then net investment will equal to present value of the lease payments. Now, haven't we computed this present value of lease payments before? Yes, right? Present value of lease payment. Here you go. We have taken the same figures to compute the lease liability when it comes to the lessee's books. So in this case, how much is the lease liability? That equals to present value of lease payment, 114,200. The same value will be the net investment in this question. Why? We didn't have unguaranteed residual value. That is the reason. So be careful. If you have unguaranteed residual value, you need to take the discounted value of that and add it to this lease liability value. Okay, so in this question, it is the same. Net investment. How to record this net investment in lessor's books? So you have one important ledger account. There's one important ledger account in lessor's books, that is lease receivables. Now, when it comes to lease receivables, it is an asset. ලෙසෝගේ පැත්තෙන් ලෙසීගෙන් හම්බෙන්න තියෙන values. It is an asset. එතකොට ඒ asset එක debit කරගන්න ඕනේ. 114,200. Lease receivables. අපි එතකොට initial. What is the initial date? Initial date is 1st April 2021. You write it as equipment. අපි equipment account එක අපේ asset එක ගත්ත account එකෙන් තමයි ඒ ගාන අයින් කරන්නේ 114,200. So the date would be the same. You write it as lease receivables. Okay, so lease receivables is 114,200. Apart from this, now, if you can remember this initial payment කියන down payment එක. lessee lessorට ගෙවපු down payment එක 50,000. මේකත් record කරන්න ඕනේ. කොහොමද මේක record කරන්නේ? You have received cash. You have received cash. In that case, it is not a lease receivable anymore because you have already received that cash debit. You are receiving money, cash debit, and 50,000 credit goes to the equipment value. ලෙසෝ කරන්නේ equipment එකක් අරගෙන ඒක මේ ලෙසීට දෙනවා. එතකොට ඒ equipment account එක temporary ඔයගොල්ලෝ use කරන equipment account එක credit කරනවා. Cash කියලා. Cash because you have received cash and then 50,000. The same date. Okay. So lease receivables is 114,200. This is the ledger account we need. Okay. Then, අපේ lease liability වලට කළා වගේ. Similar to the lease liability, when it comes to lease receivables account, this account, you need to recognize two things. What are the two things? Then, lessee ge පැත්තෙන් lease interest එක identify කරා expense එකක් කියලා. එතකොට අපේ පැත්තෙන් lessor ගේ පැත්තෙන් මොකද වෙන්නේ? You need to recognize lease interest income. Interest income you need to recognize. And on the other hand, lessee is paying installments. 40,000 installments given. That installment lessor is receiving. So, mama lessor nang I'm receiving 40,000 annually for 4 years. So, you need to recognize that. So, in the first year, what happens? First of all, you need to recognize the lease interest income. How to recognize that? Lease interest income. I'll be using the same ledger account. I'll name this as lease interest income. Income means credit. That goes to debit one lease receivables. I'm going to debit the lease receivables account because I need to receive this money. This is a receivable for me. When I get the installment from the lessee, then only I can cover this. So lease receivables account debit. What is the amount? How do you get the amount? You have 114,200 as the total lease receivables. Multiply this by the rate we are using in this question, 15%. That is 17,130. This is lease income. Lease income means lease interest income. Okay, lease interest income 17,130. You are recognizing this after 1 year. So you go to lease interest income account. That is an income account. That means it is going to be credited. Lease receivables. That is the 17,130. Hope you're okay. Lease receivables debit. Lease interest income credit. Because you need to recognize this income for the period, 1 year period. On the other hand, you are receiving the lease installments paid by the lessee. Lessee then 40,000 or given on. Lessor given on. So what happens to your cash as the lessor? Cash debit. Lease receivables. Your receivable balance is getting reduced now. When you get the cash, lease receivables credit. Cash 40,000. You are receiving 40,000. This is how you do the lease receivables account. So if you balance it off, or taking the balance 91,330, it should be the same no, because the values are equal. Interest and income value is not different because there was no unguaranteed residual value. Enisa values equal me gaane hatiyata. Balance carried down and then balance brought forward. Balance brought forward is 91,330. Now again, important thing, what? You need to show the extracts. What are the extracts in this lessor's books? First of all, when it comes to profit or loss statement, P&L, you need to recognize the income. It is the income. Income, what is that? Lease interest income. How much is the income for the period for 1 year? අවුරුද්දකට income එක කීයද? 17,130. අපි compute කරපු ගාන. It is okay. You go to statement of financial position. Let me take the values, the name, 31st March. Statement of financial position as at 31st March 2022. Okay. This is also for the year ended 31st March 2022. Okay. Now, we have to recognize this lease receivable account. Lease receivable account. Lease receivable is, we are going to receive that value for more than 12 months. So it will go for more than 12 months. So it is a non-current asset. Yes, but there's one important thing. If you can remember, our lease liability, when it comes to lessee's books, lease liability, you classify it as current liability and non-current liability. When it comes to lessor's books, lease receivable also, you need to compute as current asset and non-current asset. You need to classify. How to get the current asset? Now you know what we did for the current liability of the lease liability. First of all, you are taking the next installment. So in next year, you will be getting that installment which is equals to 40,000. 40,000 installment එකක් ලැබෙයි. ඒ ලැබෙන installment එකේ තියෙන interest income එක කීයද? Interest income in the next installment. කොහොමද අපි හොයන්නේ? මේ 91,330 වලට තමයි interest income එක next year එකේ compute වෙන්නේ. එතකොට 91,330. This is the exact same for the same as the lease liability. Okay, 91,330 multiplied by 15%. ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ අපිට ලැබෙන interest income එක. ලැබෙන්න නියමිත interest income එක. එහෙනම් ඊළඟට හම්බෙන 40,000 installment එකකින් 13,700 ම interest income එක නම් ඇත්තටම lease receivables කියලා අඩු වෙන ගාන කීයද? lease receivables කියලා අපිට හම්බෙන ගාන කීයද installment එකේ කියලා? lease receivables in the next installment. You are reducing 13,700 from the 40,000. So 40,000 ලැබෙන installment එකෙන් ඒකේ ඇතුලේ තියෙනවා interest income එක 13,700. If you can reduce that part, remove that part, balance 26,301 තමයි lease receivables කියන අපේ asset එකකින් අඩු වෙන්නේ. එතකොට 26,301 will be received in the current next year as the current asset. Next year එකේ 26,301 ලැබෙනවා. This is the current asset. Will be realized within 12 months. Then what about the non-current asset? Is AC. Total asset would be 91,330 lease receivable. Out of 91,000, you will be receiving 26,301 in the next year. Then the non-current portion would be 65,030. 65,030. Okay, so how to write this? Lease receivables. Non-current portion would be 65,330 and then current asset. Under current assets, again lease receivables. That value would be, as we computed, 26,301. This is the current one. This is the non-current portion. Okay, so this is how you recognize your transactions and then prepare the extracts of the financial statements for both lessee and lessor. දෙගොල්ලන්ගෙම lessee and lessor දෙගොල්ලන්ගෙම transactions record කරලා financial statements හදන්නේ මෙන්න මෙහෙමයි. Okay, now I'll be moving to the next one, this question. Question number 7. Question number 7. Okay, this is very similar to question number 2, but there are some important things you need to remember. We'll read this first. Tilaka Traders acquired a machine under a lease agreement with People's Leasing PLC. Now, who is the lessee? Tilaka Traders. එයාලා තමයි acquire කරගෙන තියෙන්නේ. Tilaka Traders is the lessee. Who is the lessor? People's Leasing PLC. The following information is provided. Commencement of the lease, 1st April 2021. This is the commencement date. Okay. Down payment, Tilaka Traders has paid 120,000. Sorry. And then we have very important guaranteed residual value. We have 20,000. Guaranteed residual value is 20,000. And then we have unguaranteed residual value. That value is 10,000. Unguaranteed and guaranteed both. And then legal charges paid by Tilaka traders. That value is 10,000. So Tilaka traders has paid 10,000. What is this? Initial direct. You can go to this one. I'll show you how to recognize this. Initial direct cost. Initially, you have paid these legal charges. Initial direct cost. Got a 10,000, and then installments, there will be 4 annual installments, 90,000 each. Interest rate implicit in the lease is 14%. Lease transfers ownership of the underlying asset to the lessee by the end of the lease term. Okay. Now, what happens? Here, you need to show the relevant ledger accounts of Tilaka and People's Leasing. That means both lessee and lessor with the extracts of the financial statements. So, I will not be discussing the question answer fully, but I'll show you how to recognize these guaranteed and unguaranteed residual values in the question. Okay. So, I have taken the figures. I have taken the figures in the question directly to the Excel. Commencement date, initial payment, guaranteed residual value, unguaranteed residual value, and then legal charges paid by Tilaka, installments, period, and interest rate implicit in the case. Lease. Now, one important thing, here it is not mentioned, in the question it is not mentioned about the useful life of the asset. Now, we need to have the useful life of the asset as well. No? In order to depreciate, you need to know the useful life and the lease period. Lease period is already given. Now, if I told you how to take the depreciation. Now, when you take the depreciation, you need to consider whether the lessee is getting the ownership of the underlying asset at the end of the lease term. Now, what about this question? Is the lessee getting the ownership of the asset or not? Yes, right? Lessee is getting the ownership of the asset. Then what should be used to compute the depreciation? You need to take the useful life of the machine. So useful life is the life of the machine is not given in the question. That's why I have used this. So when you do this question, use this. Useful life is 10 years. Okay. So as I told you, we can take first lease liability. Lease liability. First of all, you need to compute the lease liability. So we don't have the annuity factor given here. That means you need to compute discount factors for 4 years and then multiply. Now the thing is, we have this guaranteed residual value. So be careful how to take this guaranteed residual value into the question, into the answer. Now, when you take the lease liability, you have to take the lease payments, then you discount those lease payments and get the present value. So what is included in lease payments? As I told you, fixed payments are there. So do we have fixed payments? Yes, we have fixed payments. Fixed payments. Fixed payments for how many years? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 years for the lease period. Fixed payment. First year would be, we have installments. Yes, 90,000. So second year also we have fixed 90,000, 90,000, 90,000. Fixed payments are okay. Do we have variable lease payments? No. Do we have residual value guarantees? Yes, we have. We have guaranteed residual value. Guaranteed residual value. We are getting this guaranteed residual value at the end of the lease term. At the end of the lease term means 4th year. Remember that. So you have to take guaranteed residual value 20,000 here. For the 4th year, you need to consider. Now, do we have these exercise option for purchase, exercise price for purchase option, no penalties for terminating the lease? No, not given in this question. So we have only fixed payments and guaranteed residual value. Take the total. Take the total. Like this. Okay. Right. Now we have to compute the present value of these payments. How to compute the discount factor? 1 divided by 1 plus 14% multiplied into, not multiplied, to year 1. And then year 2, 3 and 4. So using a calculator, you can easily compute. Then I'm taking the present value of the lease payments. Present value of the lease payments. So I'm taking the discount factor. I'm taking the lease payments. Like this, you can compute. You can get the present value. And then you are adding the total 78,000, 69,000, 60 and 65. 274,076. Let me check the answer. Yes, 274,076. That is the value for lease liability. Hope you are clear with guaranteed residual value. How to treat this guaranteed residual value. Now I'll be quickly taking the right of use asset. Second step. This is the correct way of writing right of use asset. First of all, you need to take the lease liability. Initial measurement of the lease liability as we computed. This is 274,000. We take it here. Initial measurement of the lease liability. Do we have initial direct cost? Yes. In this question, lessee has paid initial direct cost legal charges. So this is the initial direct cost. So remember, you need to consider these legal charges, initial direct cost. So I'm taking initial direct cost. How much is that? 10,000. Okay. Do we have lease payments made at or before the commencement date? We call them down payments. Do we have down payments? Yes. Initial payment. That means down payment. So you need to consider these things as well. Down payment 120,000. Here. Down payment 120,000. Okay. So do we have the dismantling cost, removing and restoring the site? No, not given in this question. If you have those things, you need to take the present value and get. Okay. So in this one, we are taking the total. Total is 404,076. This is the right of use asset. So if I just show you, I will be not showing how to do these things into the all accounts, but I'll show you how to record the right of use asset and the lease liability. First of all, we'll record this lease liability. As I told you before as well, lease liability credit by 274,076. Lease liability credit. What do you write there? Right of use asset. And then right of use asset. You need to debit 274,076. It is lease liability. That is okay. Apart from that, you have paid initial direct cost of 10,000. So this is a part of the right of use asset. No. What happened to your cash? Cash credit. Debit goes to right of use asset. It is part of the asset. Like this. What happened to down payment? You have paid 120,000 as the down payment. What happened to your cash? Cash credit. Cash credit, right of use asset, debit. 120,000. Here you write it as cash. This is how you record right of use asset. How you initially recognize right of use asset. After that, I think you are clear with how to get the depreciation for the period, right? The value is 404,076. That is the total value of the right of use asset. You are dividing this value by the useful lifetime. In this question, useful lifetime is 10 years. So this would be the depreciation for year 1, year 2, year 3 and year 4. That would be the same. Hope you are okay with that computation of depreciation. Now I'm moving to lease liability account. I'll show you how to continue this. So as I told you, after recognizing the lease liability, initial lease liability 274,076, then now you need to recognize the interest expense for the period. Interest expense for year 1. How to recognize that? Interest expense, lease interest. I show it as lease interest. It is an expense. How to compute? From the initial lease liability, you are multiplying this value by the rate given, 14%. Okay, 38,371. That is the lease interest for year 1. So this is a liability. That's why you are crediting the lease liability, and debit goes to where? Lease expense account, lease expense account, lease interest expense account 38,371 debit. Okay, now the next one is you have to pay the installment. When you pay the installment, what happened to your cash? Cash credit. Debit goes to lease liability because your lease liability will get reduced. So installment value is 90,000. Cash will be credited. Cash credit, lease liability debit. So likewise, you can get the balances. Yes, 312. And then the balance would be 222,446. This would be the balance carried down. Balance brought forward would be the same. So the next year, you need to compute the current liability and the non-current liability as I taught you in the previous question. That is the same. You have to take the next installment, lease interest in the next installment, and then you can get the current liability. After getting the current liability, you can deduct that from the total liability. Then you are arriving at non-current liability. Hope you are okay with that as well. Okay. The lease interest we have computed, this 38,000 depreciation also you computed. So there are no any changes to the extracts of the financial statements in lessee's books, similar to the previous question. Now I am moving to lessor's books. One small thing. When it comes to lessor's books, I told you, you need to compute the net investment. Net investment in lease. When it comes to net investment, there are two things you need to consider. First of all, net investment means the discounted gross investment. In the gross investment, you need to take the lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. So shall we take the lease payments again? Here also you take the same thing. I'll take lease payments again. If you don't have to repeat this. Make a repeat කරන්න ඕන නෑ. මේ ගාන අරන්න තියෙන්නේ already ඕගොල්ලෝ. ඒකම ගන්න පුළුවන්. මම මේ ගාන හැදෙන හැටි පෙන්වන්නයි ගන්නෙ. දැන් lease payments කියලා අපි මොනවද ගන්නෙ? Fixed payments, variable payments, guaranteed residual value, purchase option එක තියෙනවා නම් ඒ price එකයි, terminating option තියෙනවා නම් ඒ price එකයි. ගෙවන්න තියෙන ගානයි. එතකොට ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපිට fixed payment එකයි residual guaranteed residual value එකයි variable payments එක තමයි ගණන් වල එන්නේ. ඒකෙන් අපිට තාම variable payments ආවේ නැහැ. We have fixed payments and guaranteed residual value in this question. So you can take the same. So guaranteed residual value was 20,000. Yes, I'm taking the same thing. Guaranteed residual value. මේ තියෙන්නේ මොනවද? Lease payments කියන ඒවා. ඔන්න lease payments. These are lease payments. Now apart from the lease payments, now this one, apart from this, you have to take what? Unguaranteed residual value. I'll get the same wording here. Unguaranteed residual value. So lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value, no? So you have to take unguaranteed residual value. This value also you will be receiving at the end of the lease period. So fourth year, that is the end of the lease period, unguaranteed residual value would be 10,000. Okay, now take the total. Total 90,000, 90,000, 90,000, 120,000. Now this is what you call gross investment. Gross investment equals lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. Lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value. Now you are discounting these. How to take the discount factors? Similar to what we discussed before. අපි කලින් කතා කරා වගේමයි. Rate එක same. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 discount factors ගන්නවා. අපි උඩ කතා කරා වගේම. And then multiply this discount factor by the gross investment value. Because net investment equals discounted gross investment. So you are discounting these gross investment values. Okay. Like this, you are getting the present values. So in total, what is the net investment? 279,997. This is the net investment value. So in the lease receivables account, you debit these 279,000. Now this is a machine. So you have machine account, not equipment account. So machine account, you credit 279,997. Lease receivable. Okay, so hope you are okay. Now in the lease receivables account, again you need to recognize lease interest income and the received lease installments. How to recognize the lease interest income? Very easy. Interest income, you multiply 279,997 by the rate, 14%. This is the lease interest. On the other hand, you are receiving lease installments. What about your cash? Cash debit, lease receivables credit. Your asset is getting reduced while you are getting cash. So cash, 90,000. Likewise, you can get the values done. And remember, when you record these lease receivables as an asset, when it comes to extracts, you need to classify it as current asset and non-current asset. Okay, so this is how you basically do. Basically, you record the transactions, lease transactions in both lessee and lessor accounts and prepare the extracts of the financial statements. Okay, so ඔගොල්ලෝ මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ විශේෂම දේවල් ටික තමයි එතන annuity fact එකක් දුන්නොත් කොහොමද normal discount factors දුන්නොත් කොහොමද මේක present value කරන්නේ and then මතක තියාගන්න lease liability එකයි right of use asset එක identify කරන්න ඕනේ lessee ගේ books වල lessor ගේ books වල lease receivable එක identify කරන්න ඕනේ ඒ වගේම ඔයගොල්ලෝ lecture එකේ කතා කරන්න ඇති lessor ගේ books වලට ආවට පස්සේ අපි lease classify කරනවා දෙවිධයකට as finance lease and operating lease කියලා. එතකොට finance lease නම් කොහොමද operating lease කොහොමද කියලා අපි ගණන් හදන ක්‍රම දෙකක් තියෙනවා. අපි දැන් මෙතන කතා කරේ finance lease කියලා. finance lease වෙන්නේ කොහොමද? finance lease වෙන්නේ අර මම කලින් කියන උත්සාහ කරා වගේ finance lease වෙන්න පුළුවන් situations ගොඩක් තියෙනවා. එක්ක finance lease එකක් වෙනවා lease period එක අවසානයේ underlying asset එකේ ownership එක lessee ට ලැබෙනවා. The ownership of the asset will be transferred to lessee at the end of the lease term. ඒ වගේ තව තියෙනවා කාරණා. Lessee has the option to purchase the underlying asset at a price that is sufficiently lower than the fair value of the asset. ලෙසීට පුළුවන් ලීස් පීරියඩ් එක අවසානයේ asset එක buy කරන්න. තාමත් අඩු ගානකට fair value මේ market එකේ තියෙන price එකට වඩා තාමත් අඩු ගානකට ගන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙමත් නැත්නම් lease දීලා තියෙන period එක ඒ asset එකේ useful lifetime එකෙන් major part එකක්. Let's say useful life of the asset is 10 years. අවුරුදු 10 පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්. lease දීලා තියෙනවා අවුරුදු 9ක්ම. එතකොට මේ asset එකේ useful life එකෙන් වැඩි කාලයක්ම තියන් ඉන්නේ lessee ගාවනේ. Again it's a finance lease. ඔය වගේ අපිට පුළුවන් examples and indicators lecture එකේ කතා කරපු indicators and examples use කරලා finance lease එකක්ද operating lease එකක්ද කියලා identify කරන්න. අපි දැන් discuss කරපු questions දෙකම තියෙන්නේ finance lease කියලා. ඇයි එහෙම මම කියන්නේ? ownership එක transfer වුණා. මේ ගණන් දෙකේම ownership එක lessor-ගෙන් lessee-ට transfer වෙනවා කියලා අපි consider කරා. So in that case, we have no any arguments. It's a finance lease. If not, you need to consider those examples and indicators. Ownership එක transfer වුණා කියලා නැති වුණත් සමහර අවස්ථා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. එක finance lease එකක් වෙන. So depending on the situation, you need to read the question and understand whether it is a finance lease or operating lease. Okay, so lessee ගේ books වල දැන් අපි lessee ගේ පැත්තෙන් කතා කරොත් එහෙම finance lease ද operating lease ද කියලා අපි classify කරන්නේ නැහැ. That is not required. Come right of use asset. We don't care whether whether those leases are operating lease or finance lease. That classification goes only for lessor's books. Remember that. Lessor's books. Lessor ගේ books වල විතරයි අපි එහෙම classify කරන්නේ. Lessee ගේ books වල එහෙම classify කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඔක්කොම right of use asset. So you need to recognize right of use asset and the lease liability. Okay. So hope you understood the important things in this lesson. We didn't discuss everything, but we discussed the important facts. Hope you understood everything. If you have any clarifications, you can go to your slides again and again, and then refer this tutorial again and again, and clear your doubts. Thank you.